My name is Amanda Garza, and I was 33 years old when my stepsister accused me of something that nearly erased my life. Before everything collapsed, I believed I understood my family's fractures well enough to survive them. I was wrong. My father remarried when I was 12. His new wife, Linda, had 2 children from her previous marriage. Marcus, 5 years older than me, and Rachel, just a year younger. On paper, we became siblings overnight. In reality, we became rivals forced to share oxygen. My mother had died 2 years earlier. I was still learning how to exist in a world where she didn't. Grief made me quiet, careful, and visible. That made me an easy target. Marcus made sure I knew I didn't belong. He was loud, confident, and territorial. He corrected how I spoke, how I walked, how I breathed. Rachel didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her cruelty came in whispers, perfectly timed comments slipped in when no one else was listening. "You're not really family," she once said, her voice calm, almost bored. "You just live here." I learned early that survival meant endurance. I kept my head down. I waited for adulthood. I told myself that once we were grown, things would change. They didn't. When Linda passed away years later, I thought foolishly that the tension might soften. We were adults now. The past was the past. But resentment doesn't die quietly. It sharpens. The real shift came when my father began talking openly about his will. He believed in fairness. He said it plainly, repeatedly. 3 children. Equal shares. No exceptions. Marcus hated that. Rachel smiled and said nothing, which should have terrified me more. The night everything exploded was supposed to be ordinary. Just the 4 of us. My father's house. His famous lasagna cooling on the table. The kind of evening that pretends history doesn't exist. We were halfway through dinner when Rachel put her fork down. "I've been carrying something for years," she said, her voice trembling just enough to command attention. The room went silent. My father frowned. "What do you mean?" Rachel inhaled sharply, her eyes glistening. "I didn't want to bring this up, but now that we're talking about the will, I can't stay quiet anymore." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "When we were kids," she continued, "she hurt me." I froze. For a moment, I genuinely didn't understand she meant me. My father's face drained of color. "Rachel, who hurt you?" She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. "Amanda," she whispered. The air vanished from the room. My heart slammed against my ribs. "What are you talking about?" I said, my voice breaking despite myself. She flinched theatrically. Marcus stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "Don't you dare raise your voice at her." My father lifted a hand. "Rachel, are you saying she abused you?" Rachel nodded. Tears spilled over. "I didn't want to destroy the family," she sobbed. "But I can't let her benefit from your estate after what she did to me." The word abuse echoed in my skull like a gunshot. "This is a lie," I said, shaking. "You're lying." Rachel collapsed into Marcus's arms. "See," Marcus said sharply. "That's guilt. That's what it looks like." "No, that was disbelief. That was betrayal. That was my entire childhood weaponized against me in a single sentence." My father looked between us, torn, devastated. "I don't know what to think," he said quietly. And just like that, I understood. This wasn't about trauma. This was about erasing me. The days after that dinner felt unreal, like I'd been dropped into a version of my life where the rules had quietly changed and no one bothered to explain them to me. Nothing was said outright. That was the cruelest part. My father didn't confront me. He didn't accuse me. He didn't defend me either. He moved through the house with a careful politeness, like I was something fragile and potentially dangerous at the same time. He spoke slower. He avoided eye contact. Every conversation felt like it was happening through thick glass. Marcus, on the other hand, stepped effortlessly into his new role. He became the shield, the protector, the grieving son standing bravely beside his traumatized sister. He checked in on Rachel constantly, his voice low and soothing, always loud enough for my father to hear. He made sure she never entered a room alone if I was there. He positioned himself physically between us, a silent accusation in human form. Rachel barely spoke to me at all. When she did, it was with shaking hands and downcast eyes, like my presence alone caused her pain. She never repeated the accusation directly. She didn't have to. The story was already alive, breathing on its own. And my silence, it was interpreted as confirmation. I tried at first to reason with my father. I waited for a quiet moment, caught him one afternoon in the kitchen while Marcus and Rachel were out. "Dad," I said carefully, "you know me. You know I would never." He raised his hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "I need time," he said, his voice tired, almost pleading. "This is a lot." Time. Time was the luxury they had planned for. Every hour that passed without a denial from him became another brick sealing my guilt into place. I noticed the shift outside the house first. Texts from extended family slowed, then stopped. An aunt who used to call me weekly suddenly forgot to return messages. A cousin unfollowed me on social media without explanation. It was subtle, quiet, almost elegant, exactly like Rachel's cruelty had always been. At a family friend's birthday dinner, conversations stalled when I approached. Smiles tightened. People watched me, the way you watch a stranger you've been warned about. I overheard whispers in the hallway. I just don't understand why she's still around. If it were me, I'd leave out of shame. Shame. That word lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest and refused to move. The first real escalation came in an envelope. It was waiting on the counter when I got home from work one evening, stark and official looking, my name written in Marcus's precise handwriting. I stood there for a full minute, staring at it, already knowing whatever was inside would make things worse. I was right. It was a formal notice of intent to sue. Not for abuse. That accusation stayed deliberately vague, but for emotional distress, intentional harm, psychological damage, words crafted carefully enough to destroy me without requiring proof. They were demanding compensation. Money was the excuse. Control was the goal. My hands shook as I sat at the table reading it again and again, each sentence colder than the last. This wasn't grief. This wasn't confusion. This was strategy. I confronted my father that night, placing the papers in front of him like evidence in a trial. "This is what they're doing now," I said. "This is where it's going." He read slowly, his shoulders slumping further with each page. "This is a family matter," he murmured when he finished. Something inside me cracked. "They're suing me," I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay calm. "They're destroying my name, and you're calling it a family matter." He rubbed his temples, looking suddenly old. "I'll talk to them." But I already knew he wouldn't. Rachel would cry. Marcus would guide the conversation, and my father would choose the path of least resistance, the one that didn't require him to confront the possibility that he'd been manipulated. That night, lying awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling I used to count stars on as a kid, I realized something terrifying. If this went public, even if I won legally, I would still lose everything else. Family, reputation, belonging. They had painted me as the villain, and the world was already accepting the picture. But they'd made one mistake. They assumed I would stay silent forever. They were wrong. The morning after I decided to stop waiting for someone to save me, I walked into a lawyer's office that smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. Her name was Angela Moreno. She didn't smile when I told her what had happened. She didn't soften her voice or offer sympathy first. She just listened, pen resting against her legal pad, eyes sharp and unwavering. When I finished, my throat raw and my hands clenched in my lap, she finally spoke. "Well," she said calmly, flipping through the notice Marcus had sent, "this is ambitious." I let out a bitter laugh. "That's one word for it. They're not trying to win." Angela continued. "They're trying to scare you, drag this out, make you look radioactive." She tapped the page. "And they're being very careful. Vague accusations, emotional language, just enough smoke to make people assume there's fire." My stomach twisted. "So what do we do?" "We respond," she said without hesitation, "and we don't blink." Angela filed a motion to dismiss most of their claims within days. She dismantled their language line by line, exposing how little substance there actually was behind the accusations. On paper, it was obvious. Emotion doesn't hold up in court without facts. But courtrooms don't exist in a vacuum. "The depositions were brutal," Rachel cried, through hers voice breaking, as she spoke about how Amanda's presence had destroyed her sense of safety. Angela didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Can you provide a specific date?" she asked gently. Rachel hesitated. A location, another pause, a witness, silence. Her story unraveled, not with a dramatic collapse, but with a slow, painful thinning, like fabric worn down until light shows through. Marcus's deposition was different. He was composed, calculated. He spoke in long, polished sentences that said almost nothing. At one point, he leaned back and said, "This isn't about facts. It's about the impact of her behavior." Angela's eyebrow lifted a fraction. "Impact still requires behavior, Mr. Garza. What behavior are you referring to?" For the first time, Marcus faltered. Legally, it was going well. Socially, it was a nightmare. The whispers didn't stop just because the court filings contradicted them. If anything, they intensified. Rachel and Marcus never stated anything outright to extended family or friends. They didn't have to. They used implication like a scalpel. At a wedding for a family friend, I felt it immediately. Conversations died mid-sentence when I approached. A woman I'd known since childhood avoided my gaze entirely. I caught my aunt leaning toward Rachel near the dessert table. I just can't believe she still shows her face, she whispered. Rachel sighed softly. I try to be strong for Dad. That was all it took. Even my workplace wasn't immune. A colleague who used to join me for lunch suddenly became busy. Another watched me cautiously during meetings like they were reassessing everything they thought they knew about me. My world was shrinking. One afternoon, an old friend from high school, Michael, recognized me at a cafe. He hesitated before sitting down. Everything okay with your family? He asked carefully. My heart sank. Why? He shrugged. I heard something from someone connected to your cousin. It sounded serious. It's not true, I said firmly. He nodded, but doubt lingered in his eyes, and that hurt more than open accusation ever could. Months passed like this legal progress, social decay. Then, finally, the judge dismissed most of their claims as unsubstantiated. The remaining minor point was settled for a symbolic $1. Angela smiled when she told me. It's a win, she said. They didn't want a trial. They know they'd lose. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt hollow. Because winning in court didn't restore my reputation. It didn't undo the looks, the silence, the isolation. And Marcus wasn't done. I could feel it. This was no longer about the lawsuit. This was about control. And he was moving on to the next phase. The lawsuit may have lost its teeth, but Marcus didn't retreat. He evolved. I saw it clearly the night he shifted his focus from destroying my reputation to controlling my father outright. It happened during one of the few family dinners we still managed to sit through together. The kind where everyone pretends nothing is wrong while carefully avoiding anything real. Rachel sat at the edge of the table, shoulders rounded, eyes downcast, her fragility worn like armor. My father looked exhausted before the meal even began. Marcus noticed. He always noticed. As the plates were cleared, Marcus leaned back casually, folding his hands behind his head. Dad's been doing some estate planning, he said, his tone light but deliberate. Just trying to get things organized. The room stilled. My father shifted in his seat. It's nothing major, he said quickly. Just paperwork. Marcus smiled. Right. Just making sure everyone's protected. Protected. Protected from what, I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Marcus turned toward me with practiced concern. It's not about you, Amanda. It's about Rachel. She's been through enough. There it was. The accusation rewrapped. Sanitized. Weaponized. I clenched my hands beneath the table. Rachel doesn't need protection from me, and you know that. My father opened his mouth, but Marcus spoke first. This tension, he said softly, it's not healthy. That's why it's important to make thoughtful decisions now. Thoughtful. Later that week, I stopped by my father's house unannounced. Marcus was already there. He sat at the dining table with a laptop, stacks of documents spread neatly beside him. My father sat across from him, shoulders slumped, eyes tired. What's going on, I asked. Marcus didn't even look up, helping Dad organize some things. I stepped closer, scanning the papers. Estate draft, asset summaries, notes I didn't recognize. Has your attorney seen this? I asked my father. He hesitated. We're just brainstorming, Marcus cut in smoothly. No need to get lawyers involved yet. That's exactly when lawyers should be involved, I said, meeting my father's eyes. Dad, you don't need Marcus managing this. Marcus laughed softly, always so suspicious. Or just paying attention, I replied. My father raised a hand. Enough. But it wasn't enough. Over the following weeks, I learned just how deep Marcus had embedded himself. He scheduled meetings. He called my father's attorney repeatedly. He framed every conversation around Rachel's supposed vulnerability and my instability. And it was working. One evening, my father asked me to come over. When I stepped into his study and saw the familiar documents on his desk, my chest tightened. I've been thinking, he said carefully, about what's fair. Fair. What does fair mean now? I asked. Rachel's struggling, he said quietly. Marcus thinks adjustments might help. I stared at him. You've always believed in equality. He avoided my gaze. This isn't about equality. It's about need. Need. Or manipulation. Something inside me hardened. That night I realized the truth. I couldn't rely on my father to see through Marcus's control on his own. Marcus wasn't forcing anything. He was guiding, nudging, making my father believe every decision was his idea. If I wanted to survive, this emotion wouldn't save me. I needed proof. And for the first time since that disastrous dinner, I stopped reacting and started watching. Once I stopped reacting, everything changed. I began paying attention to details I'd ignored before, the exact wording Marcus used, the moments Rachel chose to speak, the way my father's memory bent under repeated suggestion. It wasn't chaotic. It was rehearsed. And rehearsals always leave footprints. The proof didn't arrive dramatically. There was no thunder, no revelation handed neatly to me. It came from dust. I was in my father's attic one afternoon, helping him look for old tax records. The space smelled like cardboard and forgotten summers. Boxes were stacked in uneven towers, each one labeled in my father's careful handwriting. That's when I found the calendar. It was an old family planner, thick yellowed pages, dates written in pen. My father used to log everything back then: trips, appointments, camps, emergencies. He said it helped him keep life straight. Rachel's accusation had always centered on one specific summer at the lake house. My hands shook as I flipped to that year. June, July, August. Every week was accounted for. And there it was. The summer she claimed I was at the lake house, I wasn't there at all. That was the summer I had emergency appendix surgery. I'd spent weeks recovering at home, then another month with Aunt Louise because my father was traveling for work. It was all written down. Dates, locations, notes in the margins. I sat on the attic floor calendar in my lap, breathing hard. This wasn't interpretation. This was fact. For weeks I'd been defending myself against fog, against implication, against emotion. And here it was something solid enough to cut through all of it. I waited. The next family gathering came sooner than expected. Everyone was there. My father at the head of the table, Marcus confidently steering conversation, Rachel quiet, fragile, her eyes red before anyone had even asked how she was doing. I let them perform. Then I stood. "There's something we need to talk about," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. Marcus smiled tightly. "This isn't the time, Amanda." "It's exactly the time." I turned to Rachel. "You said what happened occurred during that summer at the lake house." Her face drained of color. I placed the calendar on the table. "This is Dad's record from that year," I said. "Every trip, every stay, every emergency." Silence swallowed the room. "I wasn't there," I continued. "I was recovering from surgery, with Aunt Louise. The dates don't match because your story isn't real." Rachel's mouth opened, closed. Marcus jumped in. "Trauma distorts memory." "Convenient," I said, "especially when memory only fails where evidence exists." My father leaned forward, scanning the page. His hands trembled. "Is this true?" he asked Rachel quietly. She stammered, I don't remember everything." The room shifted. It wasn't vindication, but it was doubt. And doubt was the first crack. Doubt is a dangerous thing. Once it enters a room, it doesn't announce itself. It settles quietly into corners, waits, and starts asking questions no one can ignore. I didn't have to push anymore. The truth had weight now, and it was doing the work for me. Rachel's story began to change. At the next family gathering, I watched it happen in real time. She was speaking to Aunt Louise in what she clearly thought was a private corner of the living room. Her voice was hushed, strained. "It wasn't just the lake house," Rachel said. "There were other times, too. I haven't been strong enough to talk about them." I saw Aunt Louise's brow crease. "But you told me the lake house was the only place you were certain about," she said slowly. Rachel froze. I meant it was the clearest. That was the problem with lies. They require perfect memory, and Rachel was unraveling. Louise didn't argue. She didn't accuse. She just nodded slowly, her silence louder than any confrontation. I knew that look. She was connecting dots. Marcus, meanwhile, was getting reckless. His grip on my father was slipping, and he felt it. Instead of pulling back, he doubled down. He started calling my father's attorney Ms. Taylor repeatedly, not asking, pressuring. One afternoon, Ms. Taylor called me directly. "He's very persistent," she said dryly. "Keeps pushing for redistribution." "To benefit Rachel, I guessed." A pause. "Yes. And to exclude me." Another pause. "Let's just say your concerns aren't unfounded." That was all I needed to hear. Marcus's confidence finally betrayed him during a meeting he insisted on attending with my father and Ms. Taylor. He brought Rachel along, both of them presenting urgency, like it was an emergency. Rachel cried. Marcus spoke about protection, about responsibility. Ms. Taylor asked one question. "Why now?" Marcus hesitated. "Because circumstances." "What circumstances?" she pressed. Silence. My father watched them carefully, something shifting behind his eyes. "I don't like being rushed," he said finally. "Let's take time." For the first time, Marcus had no answer. After that, family members began approaching me quietly, asking careful questions. Not apologizing, not yet, but listening. Rachel stopped speaking altogether. And Marcus, he was losing control. When people realize they've been lied to, they don't always explode with anger. Sometimes they go quiet. That's what happened to my father. After the meeting with Ms. Taylor, he didn't confront Marcus. He didn't question Rachel. He didn't even mention the calendar again. On the surface, everything looked the same. Family dinners continued. Conversations stayed polite. Marcus kept playing the dutiful son. Rachel kept wearing her carefully curated fragility. But something fundamental had shifted. My father stopped including Marcus in decisions. Not openly, not dramatically, just subtly. Meetings were rescheduled without him. Phone calls went unanswered. Documents that Marcus used to help organize were suddenly locked away in my father's study. I noticed it in the way Marcus hovered now, uncertain like a man who'd lost his footing, but didn't know exactly when it happened. Rachel sensed it too. Her tears changed. They became sharper, more desperate. She cried more often, but with less effect. Family members didn't rush to comfort her anymore. They listened, and that was worse. The final move happened without witnesses. My father met privately with Ms. Taylor. No announcements, no family discussion, no warning. He rewrote the will. Marcus and Rachel were removed entirely. Not partially, not adjusted. Removed. I didn't find out until weeks later when my father called me over one evening. He didn't look angry. He didn't look triumphant. He looked tired but resolved. I made changes, he said simply. I waited. I need peace, he continued. And I can't have manipulation around me anymore. That was it. No apology, no emotional confession, just action. Marcus found out soon after. He showed up at my father's house unannounced, rage barely contained beneath a veneer of disbelief. Voices rose behind closed doors. Rachel cried. Accusations flew not at me, but at my father. And that told me everything I needed to know. They weren't upset about being misunderstood. They were upset about losing control. After that, Marcus stopped coming around. Rachel disappeared entirely. No goodbye, no explanation. Just silence, the same silence they had once weaponized against me. Only now it belonged to them. Time has a way of clarifying what really mattered. The inheritance, the money became irrelevant faster than I expected. What stayed with me was something heavier and far more valuable. My name. The truth didn't spread loudly. It never does. But it spread steadily. Family members who'd avoided me began reaching out again cautiously at first, then more openly. No one said the words I was wrong, but they didn't need to. Their presence said enough. My relationship with my father didn't magically heal, but it became honest. We talk now, carefully, without pretending the past didn't happen. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. It's constructed quietly, brick by brick, after the fire is out. Marcus and Rachel isolated themselves completely. Without the narrative, without the leverage, they had nothing left to hold people with. Their lies collapsed under their own weight. And me, I walked away intact. They tried to erase me from the family, from the will, from credibility itself. Instead, they exposed themselves. I didn't win because I was louder. I won because I stayed, because I waited, because I let the truth speak when lies finally ran out of breath.